And some of the adults are thinking, I want to do that too. But instead you get to listen to me. Well, to the two sides of the stage here, we have symbols that encapsulate the Easter story. Over here, to my right and your left, we have a palm branch, which we had in the church last week, which reminded us that when Jesus entered Jerusalem, he came in over the Mount of Olives and down a steep hill, and you can walk down the very same road that Jesus walked down to this day, and it is quite steep, and people were welcoming him as the king, and so they were putting palm branches and cloaks to celebrate his arrival. And he actually spoke in the temple, he healed people in the temple, had a great meeting with people, and but then the religious leaders managed to conspire to have him arrested, and then he was crucified. And this is all well-known information. The fact that Jesus was crucified is regarded as historically reliable information that happened. But then over this side of the building we have a cross, and it's empty because it points to the resurrection. So from Palm Sunday, Palm Frond, to an empty cross on Easter Sunday. And Easter, if anything, is a redemption story. And we, in our culture, we love redemption stories, don't we? But most of us, the most of the time we hear the phrase a redemption story is in the context of sport. And all of those that hate sport go, oh, groan. David's going to come up with another sporting analogy, for Easter. Well, maybe, but I'm going to get another one that isn't sporting in a moment, so you have to hang fire. What on earth do we need redeeming from? That's a fair enough question, isn't it? And I think these songs that were sung to us so wonderfully by our choir today contained 3 reasons why we might need a redemption story. And the first one is in the first song that they sang. Would you be free from your burden of sin, from your passion and your pride, and from the staining that happens in our lives because of those things? We need redemption stories because we have failure. And you might think, well, I'm just going along pretty okay, but let me tell you, there are people for whom their own moral failures are acutely in their face. And if you think, well, I haven't really had many moral failures, just try really keeping the teaching of Jesus. Like, really try to love your enemies. Like, really try to give to anybody who asks for you and not expect it back. I mean, really try to live that all the time, and you will soon enough find that there's some failure in your life too. If you aren't already aware of the moral failings in your life, just try doing those things, or just wait long enough, and you'll come across a circumstance where you find that's true for you. But for many of us, it is already true for us. We are acutely aware of our own failures. Now, we live in a society that tries to downplay our failures, except they tend to elevate a few. Like, most of them are okay, and usually it's all, my failures are okay, I can live with them, but that person's failure, well. We need redeeming from our failures. And the second song, I keep finding voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. I can't feel a thing. I'm weak. I'm falling short. Speaks to the fracturing that can happen in our lives. Sometimes we just feel totally inadequate. Maybe because of the circumstances in our lives, maybe because of the things that have happened to us. Not the things that we've done wrong, but the circumstances and the things that have happened to us, the people around us. We've felt rejected or broken. Maybe it's an illness, a physical thing. Maybe it's a deep soul thing. There's a fracturing that goes on in our lives. And we so desire to be free from that fracturing. And the third song, which I just love, and we've been working on trying to have that song in our church for over 12 months. I'm so glad we have it. Do you feel the world is broken? Is all creation groaning? I'm going to refrain from trying to sing it back to you because that would ruin the experience. Because we see, ultimately we see that, and we see that in death, don't we? And we see death in all sorts of ways, and some of us are closer to our own physical death than others. And we think all of this goodness, all of these things we experience in life, and then it just gets snuffed out. Or if it's not so much about the immediacy of death, it's about politics or climate change or war or losing a job or how do I afford to buy a house or whatever. There's all this stuff about the future that we feel like we need a redeeming from. So there's our failures, there's our fracturing and our future, where we might say, yes, I need a redemption story. But in our culture, when people say redemption story, what they mean is, I've had another go. Like, we failed in the football this year, but we came back next year and we trained harder and we won, and so that we redeemed ourselves. And so that's what in our culture redemption is. Try harder, try again, redeem yourself. But many of us know that that's not really a useful answer for our failures or our fracturing or the future. Last Friday, it was Good Friday, and there was a sporting event. But there was also another event, and that was the Royal Children's Hospital appeal. And I think hospitals are a much more accurate place to understand redemption stories. Someone goes into hospital with a broken leg or a cancer or something else that they can't fix themselves. And then some amazing people fix it for them. Now, they don't get televised much, do they? But they're the deeply powerful. People get their lives back. People get their ability to work back. People get their ability to walk or to see or to hear or to eat food back. And if we're honest with our failures, our fractures and our futures, we need that sort of redemption story. And Christians say that Easter is that sort of redemption story. But the question is, what actually happened? In the way that that Easter story was portrayed for the kids earlier, it talked about Mary being confused, and people were confused. Everyone back then knew that when someone died, they stayed dead. And then they come to that isn't something they discovered by science 200 years ago. No, everybody 2,000 years ago knew that when you died, especially when you were killed by a professional killer, you stayed dead. And now there's an empty tomb. And very quickly, the first followers of Jesus came to the conclusion, they went from confusion to clarity, that Jesus had risen. And at one point, there's various recordings of people seeing Jesus, and at one point, there's 500 people at once saw him. But if we're going to rely on the Easter story for our redemption, for our failures and fractures and our futures, we need to know whether it's credible. And I'm going to give you 3 seemingly inconsequential details in the recording of the stories that lends great credibility to the resurrection of Jesus. The first one is when Jesus was hanging on the cross. Normally when people are crucified, it could take days for them to die. And they'd only been on the cross for a few hours, the Jesus and the 2 that were crucified next to him. And so it says that they didn't, very sort of respectfully, the religious leaders didn't want people on crosses for Passover. Like, they're always happy to have Jesus on the cross. They just didn't want him on the cross on the religious day, right? And so soldiers, the professional assassins who if they failed in their task, would get killed themselves. So they were highly motivated to do their job well. Came to the 2 people that were next to Jesus who were still alive and broke their legs so that they would suffocate and die. But when they found Jesus was already dead, they wanted to make sure that he was dead, and they stuck a spear in his side. And it says that blood and water flowed. Well, that's the separation of the serum from the blood, and it's a clear liquid and a red liquid. And it happens when you die. Jesus was dead. So one of the options was that Jesus didn't really die and he just sort of got up later and walked away. Well, no, this little bit of evidence says that no, Jesus really was dead. Then the second thing is, when they went to the tomb, they found the strips of cloth lying there. Now that's weird, because another option is that someone came and took the body away. Now I've been in one of the tombs that existed in that area, and they're really small and hard to get in. And like it's the day after the body's been wrapped in the cloth, and it's going to be sticky with the blood, and the cloth's going to be stuck to it, and it's going to be probably in the dark, and the chances of someone sort of unwrapping it, like I'm going to take the body, but first of all I'm going to hang around for however long it takes me to peel off all of the linen strips. They found a tomb from about the same time of Jesus, and they found a tomb with the linen lying there. The bones were still in it, because that's what happens when the body decomposes. The linen strips of linen just sort of collapse. And so that's what they saw. They saw the linen collapsed there. So it wasn't taken. The body wasn't taken. So maybe something other weird happened. And then, well, how do you explain their experiences of encountering Jesus? And some of you may have had an experience when a person you know passed away and you had a vivid encounter with them. My dad had it when my mum passed away. But the stories of some people having, like, they'd be friends of the person who died away and they'd be on the other side of the country, and all of a sudden this person would appear to them and they didn't even know they were dead yet. But it usually is for a few moments and it never happens again. These are stories that exist even today, and they're stories that existed in those days. And they knew about those sort of things. And once when Jesus appeared to them, they were afraid. And so Jesus said, "Give me a bit of fish." And he ate it. He wasn't just a ghost. He wasn't just an apparition. These appearances weren't that. So it wasn't that Jesus was still alive. It wasn't that his body was stolen. And it wasn't that they were just having some sort of visions of spiritual things or hallucinations. So when you eliminate the impossible, whatever's left, however improbable, must be true, said Arthur Conan Doyle. Although it wasn't Sherlock Holmes, apparently, that said that first. And so we would like to say that the resurrection of Jesus is public truth. It's not just like a religious idea, but it is public truth. Okay. It's not just a football redemption story. It's closer to a hospital redemption story. But it's more than that. So we can move from confusion to clarity to confidence. Paul was a guy who wasn't one of the original followers of Jesus, and he was really quite actually anti-Jesus. So much so that he would go around locking up and facilitating the murder of people who followed Jesus. He was a pretty intense sort of guy. But he wasn't like one of the original people that saw Jesus after his resurrection. He was much more like you and me after the event. Although he met people that had been with Jesus. And he had a spiritual encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, where he was going to try and arrest some more followers of Jesus. And it transformed his life. And so he then spent decades thinking about and reflecting on how the surprising truth of Jesus' resurrection changes your life. And it speaks to our failures, our fractures, and our futures. And in Romans chapter 5, which is the letter that this guy Paul had written, he said this: "You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a good person. Someone might possibly dare to die, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were in our failures and unable to redeem ourselves, Paul's reflection was that somehow this death and resurrection redeems us, reconciles us to God. He goes on to say, since we have now been justified by his blood, for if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son. The death of Jesus reconciles us back to God. It restores our relationship to him. Where there's been distance or ignorance or deliberate walking away or just ignore or forgetting, there is a reconnecting that comes because of the forgiveness that comes through Jesus' death. But Paul goes on to say to him, if we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? You see, Good Friday is not enough. We need reconciliation for sure, but we also need renewal. We don't just need, reconciliation, good, we get to start all over again and we just get to fail all over again. No, we need some change that goes on in our lives. And the story is that Jesus is alive and he comes to live with us and gives us a new life. He gives us a renewed life that enables us to be different, that speaks to us profoundly and deeply. And there's many people here who have experienced God saying to them, you're my precious daughter. You're my precious son. Go here, go there. And they've experienced healing emotionally, physically, and spiritually. People have experienced a renewal that comes from the resurrected Jesus. But what happens when you die? Well, there's lots of debates about that, isn't there? And lots of different positions. Even back in Jesus' day, with the people who were religious in Jerusalem, there were at least two camps. In many ways, bracketing the possibilities for today. One was, when you die, that's it. There's no more living after death. Once you're dead, you're gone, nothing, nada. And the Sadducees were the religious group that believed that. And then at the other extreme, at the other end, there were the Pharisees. And they said, yes, there is resurrection. Yes, there is judgment. Yes, there is renewal. But it happens at the end of the age. And so and there were arguments between these two, and the arguments sometimes got very heated, as religious arguments can. And they sometimes broke out into violence. That's how bad they disagreed with each other about these things. In fact, once, when Paul talked about this, they had to bring in the army to save him. And so we have the same question today. When you die, is that it? Or is there something that happens in the future? Well, Christians say the resurrection of Jesus says the future resurrection happens. It's not just some hope that we have that it might be true. We have in history evidence that it is true. It's already happened to someone. It's already happened to Jesus. So we know it can be true. Like, now this is stretching the metaphor, I know, and especially if you're thinking about me, right? There was a time when people didn't think you could run a 4-minute mile. And then one day, Roger Bannister ran a 4-minute mile. And all of these people started believing that it's possible now to run a 4-minute mile. Now, I could never run a 4-minute mile. Unless I was like on a treadmill on a truck and the truck was moving along. And I'd be running, but I was actually moving faster than I could possibly ever run. Like, that would be like a truck-assisted running or something like that. Not just wind-assisted, but truck-assisted, But you see, that's in a small microcosm what it actually is. Is there a future resurrection and life beyond the grave? Well, that's an idea. But now we have evidence that there is. And so there is future, and there is a hope. And there is something that God is doing to make this broken world all right. It's maybe not happening at the speed that we desire, but it is moving. There is motion. There is things that have happened and that are happening that God is doing to bring us a future and a hope. And so The resurrection of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus, speaks a redemption story into our failures. It speaks a redemption story into our fractures. And it speaks a redemption story into our futures. It speaks reconciliation. It speaks renewal. And it speaks the hope of resurrection. And I don't know where you are in the spiritual journey, but I know that wherever you are, it's possible for us to step more fully into this truth. Maybe you've been following Jesus for decades. Well, there is scope for you to more fully step into the reconciliation and the forgiveness that comes at Easter. Yes, God, I can be honest with you about this failure in my life because I don't need to hide, because you're not going to reject me. You're going to forgive me. This burden, this inner pain in my soul, this broken heart, God, that constricts me and sabotages me. God, I crack open my soul and let you in and ask your love to heal it and renew it. God, my fears about the future, maybe what will happen next week or maybe what will happen next year or in the next decade. God, these things concern me and consume my mind. I want to let the sure certainty of a glorious future with you fill that uncertainty and displace that fear. And the good news is we can do that right where we are. We don't have to go to some special place, because we shared communion this morning, which reminds us that God is closer than breathing, even to you. And you can just quietly in your heart say, God, I want to know you more. I want to understand this death and resurrection. I need to know. I need to receive forgiveness. You can just pray it quietly in your heart, even right at this moment. Or you can say, God, I know I need renewal. Or God, I want to walk with you into the future. So you can just respond to God right where you are, even without anybody even knowing that you are. But you might think, there's some things I need to find out more about, and I want to do that. Well, you can read the Bible, and you can find online versions of that for free. If you don't have one, I can give you a free one even today. And we have people here that have read the Bible for years, and we offer small groups where people can get together and read the Bible. You don't have to have the right answer. You just get to read it together and find out. Well, there's other ways that we can help you learn more if you would like. But Jesus died. Everyone agrees with that. The tomb was empty. People understand that. The evidence points to the remarkable truth that he came back to life. Amazingly. And it is amazing, because it speaks to our failures, our fractures, and our futures. Let's pray. God, we just are so consumed so often with just getting through the day. For work or school or dealing with family or doctor's appointments or wondering what we're going to do next, how we're going to make ends meet or whatever it is, God. There's just so much things that crowd our minds. And I pray for us today that Easter would break through into the crowding in our lives. And just as that stone was rolled away, that our minds would be cracked open to the deeper possibilities of new life with you. And I pray, Lord, that you would bring reconciliation and renewal and the hope of resurrection to people's hearts today. You would bring greater clarity. And you'd give us the gift of confidence in you, that we can say, yes, Jesus, I want to follow you.